far away. Let's talk story. It's where my mama was born, it's where I come from, it's where my daddy fell in love not long ago.
Aloha everyone, this is Larry Camp, and welcome to the Nobody Knows Your Story podcast, which just happens to come with a side of Hawaiiana. Nobody Knows Your Story is a podcast which I believe will impact each listener in a positive way. As you listen to the experiences that have transformed, shaped, and guided each guest, perhaps you'll better understand your own personal journey. Some will surprise, some will make you question, and some will inspire, but all will leave you in a better place for listening in. As for the Hawaiiana, well, that's just a big part of my life story. So I invite you to check in from time to time, or better still, add Nobody Knows Your Story to your list of favorite podcasts. You'll enjoy hearing the life experiences of people just like you.
Back to the days when we were young, we used to play all day until the sun went down. Ride a bike, fly a kite, take a walk or run. Not a care in all the world, man, life was fun. And mama would bring us to the sandy seashores, and daddy would probably see me ride my surfboard. And grandma loved us all, but she loved me more. At least that's what she told me when I was 4. Sped it up 6 years to the age of 10. Want to school just to cruise with my classmates then. We used to laugh after class in the hallways and strolling home with the crew of my closest friends. And dinner was ready at 5:30 sharp. The whole family was there to pray before we start. Thinking of those times nowadays is hard, though it's close to my heart, Lord, it seems so far. So let's turn back time when it was simple and kind. Said we never knew wrong and we never known better, but right now I wanted to feel like a kid again, feel like a kid again. Feel like a kid again, 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 feel like a kid again. Right now I wanted to feel like a kid again. Let me take you to a time when we were 12 years old. All my friends shared secrets that I still ain't told, and all I could dream of was a girl to hold. Puppy love like a dove, saw her arms unfold. Took a hit from a split when I was just 13, while listening to the music of Bob Marley. Yes, everything nice, everything I read, because this is growing up in a Hawaiian style. Walking through, never knew how to do high school, but I always studied hard, never played the fool, except the times that we cut class and I did school too. Meet at my girlfriend's house, so catch bus number 2. I remember how fun it was to turn 18, and the feeling of chasing after all my dreams. Never known which path would be best for me. I pray the mistakes that I made don't follow me. So let's turn back time when it was simple and kind. Said we never knew wrong and we never known better, but right now I wanted to feel like a kid again, 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 feel like a kid again. Right now I wanted to feel like a kid again. Time sure flies, how long has it been? We lost dear grandpa and grandma with him, and uncle too soon went to his heaven. I wish I could have tell them how much I love them. There's no more dinners at grandma's place, cause the next generation got a different taste. Pay $10 whole for a parking space. Everything's sky high on the minimum wage, and kids nowadays don't know what's fun. Getting lost in the web, they never seen the sun. And whatever happened to the dog I found? Cause mom made me give it to the local pound. I made so much friends, some come and go. Some twisted the script and became my foes. But there is one thing that we all know. Said you reap what you sow, that's how life goes. So let's turn back time when it was simple and kind. Said we never knew wrong and we never known better, but right now I wanted to feel like a kid again, 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 feel like a kid again. Right now I wanted to feel like a kid again.
Aloha, friends, and welcome to what will be another interesting life story. Now, we just heard Lion Faya with Feels Like a Kid Again, and mid-podcast, we're going to hear the Kauau Crater Boys with a favorite of mine, Surf, from their first album in 1991. Now, if you're new to the podcast, I just need to say that I do include a little bit of Hawaiian or Polynesian, Jawaiian music, mostly because I like it, but also it's just meant so much to me in my life since I was first introduced to it on a trip to Hawaii in 1975. So yeah, that's one reason. The other reason is I want folks around the world to hear these artists and hopefully purchase their music. So if you like what you're hearing, please support the artists by doing just that. Download their music, purchase it, and help support them because they might be a big name in Hawaii, but outside of Hawaii, a lot of these folks really don't have much of a following. So my guest today is Jacob Roy, and he's going to share his story, which, well, it's pretty interesting. And I know that it starts out in rural China. So I'm going to let Jacob talk about that. Jacob, welcome to Nobody Knows Your Story.
Yeah, thank you, Larry. First of all, thanks for having me. This is such a cool opportunity to be on. I've come to know your show a little bit newer, but I've really enjoyed listening to the various stories. And yeah, just going back to where I want to start my story, it starts out in rural China in Jiangxi province, 2001. And it's kind of a mysterious story in many ways, I would say, because I was first put up for adoption around the age of 1 because I had a heart problem. Even that is a little bit clouded in mystery. But at 1, I had open heart surgery to fix that. And then I was put up for adoption. And then around age 2 to 3, I was put into a foster home in China. I guess from ages 0 to 1, I was up to an orphanage. And then from 1 to 3, I was in the orphanage. And then from 3 to 4.5 or so, I was in a foster home. So growing up, I guess that I don't remember any of those experiences from either the foster home, orphanage, adoption, really. But when I was 4.5, I was adopted from rural China. I was in Nanchang, which is a smaller Chinese city, still home to a little over 10 million people. But yes, I was adopted when I was around 4.5 by my mom. And she's originally from Syracuse, New York. She was born and raised there, and my grandfather worked in the area. So when I was adopted, I went straight to Syracuse, New York, and met my family. So yeah, I often tell people maybe this part of my story, just very matter of fact, very factual, because I have very little emotional attachment to this period of time, simply because it felt like a lot of things just happened to me because I have no memories of the orphanage or a foster family or even being adopted. So I guess we can really start the story where I'd like to start the story is just being in upstate New York, being in Syracuse, New York. I think as I've gotten older, I've really been able to appreciate growing up in upstate New York and maybe a different experience than a lot of other people that I'm with now, now that I live in DC. So I think that's something I'd like to kind of note. But yeah, I was raised in upstate New York. I have a younger brother. He was also adopted from China, notably from a different part of China, but he was adopted when I was, I believe, 6 or 7, and he's 2 years younger than me. So that was also something I actually remember. I remember going back to China with my family, with my mom and one of her friends to adopt him. So that was probably my first memories of China, which is interesting because my first memories of China, despite being from China, were about adopting my brother. So that's kind of a cool maybe narrative. And also one thing that kind of formed my childhood is my family. So my mom adopted me when she was a little bit older, but she was never married, and she's never been married. So single mother. And she has 6 sisters. Many of them live in Syracuse, New York. Once again, kind of growing up in the area, that really shaped my life in a lot of ways because having, almost like 6 aunts all the time was really nice for my mom just to have, that extra support, but also just shaped my experiences around growing up with predominantly just women in my life. I know this is something other guests have talked about too, just being a man and or a male and growing up with a bunch of women really does shape how I've kind of viewed relationships for one part, and then also how I view I think women, and then also interactions between men and women. So I think that's always been for the better. I've never had, issues speaking with women. If that's something to note. Adults and people my age. So I've always felt comfortable around them. And at the same time, though, I think it maybe caused a little friction between the men in my lives, if anything. Growing up single mother, she was a neonatologist, so she was a doctor. So I was in a very kind of, I don't know, I felt maybe alone at times because having experience of, being Chinese in upstate New York, there weren't that many people, especially Chinese adoptees, even fewer. So I think in some ways, looking back at, those first maybe elementary school days, I felt kind of lonely and very confused at times, right? Just confused about why I was where I was. And even now, I mean, I'm still a little confused about what happened, but I think I've definitely grown to appreciate just those key facts that molded my childhood and even now adult life. So, right, having, being adopted from China, being adopted by a single mother, and then also growing up in upstate New York and yeah, just having a very different maybe cultural perspective than some other Asian people.
I know that just the information that we've talked about and I've seen that you sent to me. You did a lot of the things that a young man would do growing up. You played little league and different things, and
Yeah.
you ended up gravitating to lacrosse, which lacrosse wasn't big out here in the West when I was growing up, but definitely I could see myself playing that because I've always enjoyed games that involved hitting a ball or running. So I know I would have been into lacrosse. It just wasn't back when I was in high school. It wasn't a thing out here in the West, but it is becoming more. I just saw a kid walking home from school the other day carrying a lacrosse stick. So, I mean, it's becoming a thing. So, but you played that a lot.
Yeah, yeah. So I'll just say, yeah, growing up, I did a lot of the, typical activities I think kids are kind of put through. So I did music, I did sports. So I played basketball, I did lacrosse, and then I did baseball. I was one thing to note that I never really enjoyed basketball and I never really enjoyed soccer, other than another sport I played, because I always played defense and I was always like very anxious when I messed up. I always, I think I've heard you talk about it with some of your friends at softball, but like, that feeling when you mess up, I still remember, I remember even like in JV soccer, just like completely whiffing on a ball and just remembering that horrible feeling you get. So one thing that I really liked about lacrosse was one, it was physical. I liked the idea of being able to hit people, and then two, I also really liked the idea of wearing a helmet. It sounds kind of weird, but I think when you wear a helmet, people just don't see you as well. You have to remember the number, you have to remember something. But in basketball, you can see exactly who missed the shot, who missed the rebound, who kind of messed up. I felt like in the cross, because it's a bigger field, it's a little bit faster. Having that helmet just made me feel a little bit more invisible. And it kind of gave me some confidence, I think, to, take those risks, take that risky ground ball or be okay messing up a pass or, when the other team scores on me because, I play defense, kind of having that comfort in having a helmet. And yeah, so I think that was one thing I really enjoyed about that sport. I always wanted to play football growing up. My mom was vehemently against that. So those conversations were shut down. But I do think, especially now that I look back on my lacrosse days, I really did kind of appreciate having that helmet. And then one thing also, like I did some travel leagues over the summer. So that was always fun kind of traveling with guys from my community. I went to sorry, we're going to go a little bit back, but I went to a small private school throughout most of my life. So I went to this school starting fourth grade and I graduated there in high school. But it was a pre-K to 12 school with about 400 kids in total. My graduating senior class was 30 kids. So that just gives a little context of how small my schooling experience was. But outside of my schooling experience, I did lacrosse, I did Boy Scouts, I did things outside with more of the, the public schools and the other kids in my area. So I never felt like alone in that regards. And I think partly because of the sports I did, I made some great friends doing all the sports you do when you're little.
Well, let's go back to your school time because I know that when you're in that school, from what I could tell, academics were stressed, and you guys did the Model United Nations. You were a small school, but
Yeah.
yet you did very well. I mean, you guys were like ranked. And again, I didn't know much about that. That's not something I participated in, so it's always interesting to me when I hear things that others are doing. So why don't you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So I think once again, to put it in context, in my small school, we always had a joke that our best sport was Model United Nations. It wasn't soccer, it wasn't basketball, it was MUN, Model United Nations, which is basically, for those who might not know, it's kind of like a mock trial, pretending to be UN countries, basically, and you sit in these committees. So, for example, like the General Assembly, which has, most of the UN parties and they're able to vote. It's kind of role playing in the sense that you select or you're given a country, let's say like Germany or something, and then you go to this conference with a bunch of other high school students and you kind of advocate for Germany's position on whichever topics the committee's talking about that day. So I remember like one of the first ones I did, which is incredible now because it's still going on, but the war in Ukraine. So I think I was on the Security Council. I forgot which country I was, but I was in the Security Council and I was representing that country and trying to resolve the crisis in Ukraine. And this was probably like 2016, 2017. So, just kind of shows how everything is just kind of continuous. But no, I really enjoyed my time there. We had this very intense teacher who was our advisor for MUN, former SU Syracuse University football player. He was very into just like kind of equating MUN to sports, which I enjoyed as an athlete, kind of, always talking about doing kind of our practices as reps, something like that. So I enjoyed that intensity and I really enjoyed seeing someone enjoy what they do, which sounds silly. So MUN is the high school activity. I did it freshman year, but I remember even freshman year just feeling how invested our advisor was in wanting to be invested in MUN as well. So I think I've enjoyed a lot of things and a lot of my hobbies revolve not around like specific interests, but I really like watching people enjoy doing something and then showing that passion. So MUN was a great example of that. And we got to go to a lot of awesome places. I mean, in high school, I went to Mexico City for a conference. I went to Beijing, China for another conference. And we also did a trip to Costa Rica. So, no, I think MUN kind of molded a lot of my high school experiences and also my interest in different cultures and, world perspectives. I really love the idea of maybe not necessarily writing my research papers, which is a part of MUN. You have to write these like long research papers about your position. I didn't ever love that part, but I really did enjoy learning about different cultures and different countries and understanding their, political history was always interesting to me. And then also at the actual conferences, I really enjoyed just meeting new people, other kids from the area for the most part, or, when we went to the international conferences, people from all over the world. So those are some really fond memories I have and kind of opened up my interest in politics, political sciences, which I ended up doing in college, but then also just appreciating the opportunities to meet new people. Another experience that I did growing up, I was in Boy Scouts. So I, went through the ranks at Eagle Scout. But one thing I did in, I think maybe eighth grade, I went to Japan for 2 weeks. It was part of the World Scouting Jamboree. So basically a big camp out for scouts from around the world. But it was really an interesting experience. It was the first time I actually got to go back to Asia. So we were in Japan, Yamaguchi, Japan. And that was really exciting. We spent about a week just kind of being tourists and then a week just kind of traveling or just camping at this site. But I really enjoyed the tourism part. We got to go to historic Tokyo and just, learning more about, feudal Japan. I really loved the history once again. And also, interestingly, because I'm from New York, the way that like the groups that were sent over were structured, we just ended up being with California kids. So we were kind of a mixed troop, which is what it's called, I guess. And we had about half of the kids were from the Northeast, and then half the kids were from like LA. So that was really cool because there are a lot of Asian Americans. And I think that's kind of what planted the seeds and like, oh, I should, do a better job of trying to connect with other Asian people and my, culture, even though I think there are very few opportunities growing up doing that. But I think that opportunity really planted the seed. And then going back to China, Beijing, I think that was my sophomore year of high school. That was also a really cool opportunity to go there with a bunch of my good friends. Even now, like I'll grab coffee with people from high school. We'll still chat about, some of the fun stories that we have from just, I mean, we went to the Great Wall, we went to the Forbidden City, we did a lot of the touristy things. And of course, we did the MUN part too. But I really did enjoy looking around and just looking at different people living their lives. I don't think I'm a nosy person per se, but when I'm walking around, I really do like to kind of just, wander my eyes around and kind of imagine what people are up to. It's like, I think being in Beijing, such a huge city, millions and millions of people, everywhere you look, there were people. And it was hard for me to not, one, wonder what their lives were like. And then two, also, just not knowing anything about my birth parents. I think it just kind of gave that sense of like, I think now I've tried to embrace the idea that I will probably never know who my birth parents are. And I think when I was in China, especially looking around and being like, in theory, any of these people could be related to me, but I'll never know. I definitely had that feeling when I went back to China at MUN, but also I think that it's kind of molded how I see everyone now. Like not obviously like not like biologically related, but that concept of like, no, we're all in this together. We're all humans. We all have really interesting stories. And I think your show kind of helps bring that to light too. But I think I've always been able to really see myself in others because of not knowing who my family is. And I think that's something that will stick with me, that perspective.
In visiting with people over the last 5 years on this podcast, I can tell you that some people are really into their families and really into their genealogy. And I can just say that's not me personally.
Yeah.
My family's from like Ireland, and I think my dad's side was from Wales, and like, that's cool. But I have
Yeah.
no interest in like, oh, I've got to go to my homeland or, but I get that people do. And I think that's what's great is that we don't all have to be the same, think the same. All of our lives are unique to our own experience. And so your experience is vastly different than mine. Just the fact that you were adopted and I wasn't, that makes us a little different there. And you're going to have a different perspective.
No, I mean, even just I always think about, and it's hard not to, but what if I wasn't adopted? What if I, stayed in China? Of course, being in China is like, wow, this could have been my daily life. I could have been kind of any of these people. I probably wouldn't have, once again, being rural China, health issues, probably a very different life than the actual maybe working people of Beijing I was seeing. But nevertheless, I think that really, stands true. And to go back to genealogy and that history, I think especially when I was in middle school, high school, I was really interested in genealogy and lineage, and I loved going through like royal family trees. Not because I like enjoyed royal history necessarily, but I love the idea that people could trace their families that far back. And I wouldn't say I'm like envious of it, but I think it is a very cool thing to be able to say that you have. Like whenever family friends or friends pull out, sometimes people will make books of their long family history, and I'm like, wow, that's really cool. My family kind of has a version of that too, the Roys, but no. So I think it's also something always in the back of my mind is like, it's really cool for those people that can look at that history and appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, so can you speak Mandarin or Cantonese at all?
No, I think this is also a big regret. Growing up, my mom did try to put us in Chinese learning classes. That I think we were a little too old by that point. And I mean, growing up for me, I was not like anti-Asian or like, but I definitely had strong feelings of, once again, maybe those frustrated, just frustration, kind of upset at not like Chinese people, but just those situations that put me where I was. I didn't feel like I owed, and even now, I still don't feel like I owe Chinese people. Like I don't feel like I need to learn Chinese language like Mandarin or Cantonese,
Right.
necessarily. And that might change, of course, but I never felt like because I was adopted and because I didn't have those same opportunities of like my family speaking Chinese that I had to like commit myself to that, But once again, perspectives change. So that's where I stand now.
Years ago, in the business world, I had quite a few employees in the San Francisco area that were Asian and Chinese. And I like different cultures. I've heard you say that, as you went around to Mexico City or Costa Rica or Japan, and you can't help but gain knowledge when you're doing these things because you're seeing things that you only looked at in magazines or books, and you're seeing them firsthand. And there's something about that is just, to me, I love it. And I'm doing more of it now at this point in my life than I've ever done. And so I really enjoy getting out and seeing different parts of the world, different peoples, different cultures, different foods. Again, we're all humans of this planet. We all hope that we can make things work out and we can all get along. I know it's difficult at times, but I think that when I travel and I meet people around the world, that's the message I get from them too. They're nice, they're kind, they go out of their way to be helpful. And I've rarely had a bad experience in any country I've been in.
Yeah. And I think this kind of goes back to maybe how I was raised. I think my family is cautiously optimistic, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a sense of optimism, like, work hard, whether that was in school, whether that was in music, sports, at least, try your best. And it won't always be good, but you should continue to try because maybe it will be good one day. And I think when it comes to viewing other cultures and people, I think very similar perspective. And once again, like moving to DC, especially, I did that in college, has really changed my outlook on just how I see different people. Like being in a city where it's relatively diverse, it's really nice to, obviously I'm not friends with everyone here in DC. I'm not friends with everyone anywhere, but it's always cool to see just different groups of people get together.
1, 2, 3, 4. Surf. Surf. Way I say to make music with the ocean day by day. I surf all day, play music all night, and I just can't wait till the morning light to go surf. Ooh, wow. Surf, everybody go surf. Ooh, wow. Surf, surf. I check all the island breaks I know, but the place I go is the Kaiser Bowl. I surf with the guys from the Kaiser Surf Crew. Very much Bob and Dennis too. We all surf. Ooh, wow. Surf, everybody go surf. Ooh, wow. Surf, surf. Waimea, Sunset, Pipeline, Haleiwa, Bell's Land, Honduras, Papaus, Alamoan, and the Kaiser. Oh, everybody go surf. Everybody go surf. Ooh, wow. Surf, surf. If I can do it, so can you. So go surf. Ooh, wow. Surf, everybody go surf. Ooh, wow. Surf, surf. Surf will never, never die, 'cause the feeling makes me fly. surf. Ooh, ah, surf. Everybody go surf. Ooh, ah, surf, surf. By Mea, Sunset, Pipeline, Haleiwa, Bells Land, Bumburas, Rockpile, Alamoana, and the Kaiser. Oh, everybody go surf. Ooh, ah, surf. Everybody go surf. Ooh, ah, surf. Everybody go surf.
So your mom was a huge Syracuse fan.
Yes, yeah.
And I know that you went to George Washington University. So did you think growing up that you were going to go to Syracuse?
No, I think I wanted to get out. So after high school, I had some knee issues. Maybe we can talk about it later. But going to college, I wanted to branch out a little bit, get out of New York. I was honestly thinking about going to California. There were definitely some aspirations to do that. Once again, to connect with maybe more of some Asian Americans. Honestly, that was something I was keeping in the back of my mind. But what happened was I had this knee injury, and that kind of stopped me from maybe applying to all the schools that I wanted to. GW was the perfect fit, though. I went into GW as a finance major. That did not stand very long. I did not do very well the first semester or so, but I really enjoyed the experience being in DC. It's a cool city to be in. No, I don't think I imagined myself going to George Washington for undergrad, but I definitely didn't imagine myself, now I'm in grad school, at Georgetown. So there's a big historic rivalry between Syracuse and Georgetown. My mom wasn't like, she was obviously proud that, going to grad school and whatnot, but she's definitely made comments about, like, the bad guys, because there's a long history between, the Big East, Syracuse and Georgetown. Yeah, no, I've enjoyed both experiences, and I think DC is the perfect distance from home, 6-hour drive or so. So I don't feel like I'm too far from home, but I'm also not, home isn't 15 minutes away kind of thing.
Yeah. So were you a big fan of Jim Brown growing up?
I'll be honest, when it comes to Syracuse sports, I really didn't get into it more until college. Once again, I think leaving Syracuse, I kind of have more nostalgia for the place, and I was kind of missing those experiences. So most of my Syracuse knowledge is maybe like COVID and beyond. Obviously,
Right.
Growing up, Ernie Davis, legends like that. We've talked about, but I think I really got into Syracuse basketball when their last March Madness run, which was probably like 2016. I'm not a super fan like my mom, but yeah. So that's definitely something I've always that I think kind of makes a key pillar for her. That love of sports, that love of community, and then also my grandfather was another big Syracuse fan. So whenever I tell people I'm a Syracuse fan, it's kind of fun because there aren't too many of them, and then I think people don't realize how big a fan my mom is.
And the reason I said Jim Brown, because I know he played lacrosse also.
Yeah. And actually, we had a famous Syracuse lacrosse player. His grandson coached us for lacrosse. I'm blinking on his name, but yes, yeah. And also, growing up in Syracuse, there's a lot of references to Syracuse. Whether that was, we did a lot of soccer practices at their facilities, so stuff like that.
Yeah. I think that we need to talk a little bit about you switched your major from finance, to philosophy, I believe. And
I did it to political science. Yeah.
okay, but there was something about philosophy that you had though, because I remember you wrote a 20-page paper on
Yeah.
the meaning of life, right?
Yes. So yeah, I switched to political science as my major, but I did a minor in applied ethics. I wanted to do a philosophy major. It didn't work out, but yeah, my senior thesis was a 20-page essay about the Monty Python, who is one of my favorite comedic groups.
Yeah.
And it's their movie, The Meaning of Life.
Mm-hmm.
And for those that haven't seen it, it's basically a bunch of little skits about different parts of your life. And I mean, I saw that when I was in high school, like, early high school. I was really into comedies and movies like that. But it was really awesome to be able to write about it. My teacher was really into it. My professor was really into the idea of using Monty Python as a response to, it's going to sound very nerdy, maybe academic, but Thomas Nagel, this other philosopher, he writes this essay called The Absurd. And it's basically talking about the absurdity in life and how we should respond to it, basically. And once again, I think the way I read it, it's been a while since I read it, but it felt like kind of cautiously optimistic, but not as heroic as Camus, as Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus. So maybe we're going down the rabbit hole here, but it's not as heroic as Albert Camus' The Myth of Sisyphus, where basically he urges you to try to make it heroic. Like, you fight the absurd, you roll that rock up the hill, which is what Sisyphus did. You keep doing that, and there's something kind of heroic about that. I think Nagel takes a more nuanced approach, where he's like, it's definitely absurd, but we don't need to make it heroic. I think we just need to kind of embrace it more so. And then I think Monty Python, bringing Monty Python into all of this, the meaning of life, I think is a better response, as in we need to laugh at the absurd. Like, we should actively laugh at weird moments in our lives. It happens all the time, whether that's like weird, awkward social interactions or just, I just watched Warfare, which is a new movie that just came out about the Battle of Fallujah. So I think one thing, I was always very interested in growing up was history. And I think a lot of war and conflict is so absurd. And I think Monty Python does a really interesting job, at least, of showing violence. And they do that a lot in The Meaning of Life, and how the violence itself isn't funny, but the social constructs that we have around it are kind of funny. I think one of the examples would be in the movie, they have like the Zulus overtaking a British site, right, during the British Zulu Wars. And the joke is like this British officer is drinking tea as the camp's getting overrun. And, they're just very posh, and everyone else is trying to get them to safety, but they're just taking their time. So I think, that's kind of poking fun at maybe the social hierarchies within the military system, but also just how absurd war is like, why would I, continue my tea as clearly I'm in danger? So yeah, that's a lot. I don't know how you're going to be able to fit all that.
No, that's all right. You can't go wrong with Monty Python, though. I'll tell you that. Life of Brian. Some of we just love them. Their brand of humor is one that I think appeals to many people and not to others, and that's okay.
Yeah. I think Monty Python has to be one of my favorites. I loved Blackadder growing up. I love, just British comedy. It's so different than American comedy. I love American comedy too, but I enjoy that maybe darker side of humor. And then also, I think in some ways growing up, it was a way for me to kind of connect to my mom, at least maybe her generation. Like, my mom, was born in the 60s. So I went out of my way to try to watch older things because of her. I think some of her tastes in music, movies were older. So I remember watching like MASH. That was like something I did just because I thought, my mom talked about watching MASH growing up, but I might as well watch it too. So I think, once again, those perspectives kind of encouraged me to look at older things as a reference point just because of my mom.
Well, and you talked about music a little bit in your mom's music. You mentioned that Paul McCartney was kind of a big influence in the Beatles. And of course, I love the Beatles. So, and I've seen Paul McCartney in concert. I saw George Harrison in concert. I've had the opportunity to just really live the whole Beatle experience because I was 8 years old when they came out with, Meet the Beatles in 1964. So they've just been a big part of my life. So I think, did you say you played Rock Band with your mom with that? Was that what it was?
Yeah. So we used to play Rock Band, which is kind of a spoof off of Guitar Hero. And we used to play the Beatles version of that. I think my mom was like, oh, because it's cleaner than the normal Rock Band with maybe more of the explicit songs. But I think some of my fondest memories growing up were playing Rock Band with my mom, my aunt, and then my brother as well. So yeah, Rock Band, Beatles songs. That's kind of how I was introduced to the Beatles. And I think I really grew more appreciation for them in high school and then into college. But on Spotify, at least, how at the end of the year, you get your Spotify Wrapped that shows your top artists. I think the Beatles have been my top artists for the past probably like 4 or 5 years kind of thing. So I'm really into the Beatles. I think, seeing Paul McCartney is definitely on the bucket list. I need to do that sooner than later. But yeah.
Yeah, that's cool. My kids really they like the music that we listen to too, because when they would get in the car and we go on trips, we'd always have like classic rock and roll or whatever. So I've told people this before on my podcast, but my oldest son, his first concert was Michael Jackson. My
Oh,
second
wow.
son, his first concert was ZZ Top. And my daughter, her first concert was Billy Joel. So we run the gamut. We've got
Yeah.
a broad, and very versatile musical, likes in our family, and still do. Music's a big part. We had friends over last night, and we were listening to a lot of Jimmy Buffett. So
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, there's no one genre of music I like. I love. I guess, and sometimes genres change their names too. But they used to have this term called Motown, and that was
Mhm.
basically like, Stevie Wonder or the Supremes or the Temptations. And I loved that music, Al Green growing up, so very versatile. And I think that having a broad spectrum, because you also listen to Benny Goodman and some of the
Yeah.
big bands, right? That's because your mom
Yeah.
was into it.
And right, those car rides. So I always joke with her that there were like three different genres we listened to throughout the year. We would listen to big band, like jazz, right? Primarily. Because she played the clarinet growing up. She loved the clarinet. She was bio, I think, and also music in her undergrad. So, that's something she took pretty seriously, and that, rubbed off on us for practicing and doing music. But no, she loved the big band. So Benny Goodman is definitely one of them. I think one of my favorites is what's it? Don't Sit Under the Apple Tree, one of their songs. So just that I wasn't like scared of like old things. I think some people now, when I tell them, oh, I watched a black and white movie from the 50s the other day. They're like, oh my God, I've never watched black and white movies. That's so old. But honestly, I think some of my now also it's definitely a pendulum, right? You can definitely go the wrong way and be like, no, I only watch black and white movies. But no, I enjoy movies like Shrek as much as I enjoy movies like Ikaru. I think it's important to have that expanse and that perspective.
And now you're doing your own podcast. You're starting one, right? I don't know how far you're into it. I think,
Yeah.
is it called what? Bless the Bridge or?
Yes, yes. So part of the way I found this podcast is actually kind of doing some research, and I've been wanting to do a podcast. You can ask my friends. I've been wanting to do a podcast since probably like freshman year of college. I think it was of the time everyone was kind of coming out with podcasts. But once again, I think I've always really appreciated listening to stories. And the premise of this was that I have a lot of close friends that I know well, but I don't know much about their families and like their lives outside of like the sports and the talks that we had. I wanted to learn about, how your parents, met, how you became who you are, those kind of life experiences. And now I think that's kind of come into Bless the Bridge podcast, which I actually just put out my first episode, very much a test run, this morning in preparation for this. But this is um, this is a really cool venture for me personally. I enjoy, doing the interviews, reaching out to friends, and the premise that I have, or like the big thing that I want to do, is just meet with people that I know already, people that I know but maybe not very well. So the second podcast that I'm coming out with is with the person that took my job. That like I left my job to go to grad school, and the person that filled my role, it's going to be an interview with him. So someone that I probably wouldn't have known very well if I hadn't thought of this podcast idea, but it's given me an excuse to reach out and ask, oh, you want to be on my podcast? I'd love to kind of learn a little bit more about you. I have some other friends from work that I'm also college friends with, so that kind of helped. But I think for me, this has been an opportunity to just feel more confident in reaching out to people. Reaching out to this podcast was kind of on the whim. I was talking to my girlfriend. I was like, there's this podcast I've been listening to. It's really good. I really like the stories, and I felt the genuineness in your podcast, and I was like, I want to create kind of something similar, but just off of the people that I'm around. So I think I've had some really incredible conversations. The first person I interviewed, I've known him since eighth grade, and I learned a lot about how he saw his Sri Lankan American identity. So things like that, I think it's really nice to force myself to sit down and learn about that.
You mentioned that kind of it gives you a chance to have a kind of a deeper dive into somebody's life, because when you're sitting in the airport and you're sitting next to somebody and you have a 5 minute conversation, you'll learn a few things, where they're
Yeah.
from, maybe where they're going, where they've been, whatever. When you have a time like we have right now where you could spend 30, 40 an hour, you really get to know somebody on a much deeper level. And that's why I enjoyed this podcast and doing these things and talking to people. And some of them have been my friends, people I've known. I interviewed my sister and learned things, and she's been my sister for a long time. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
you know a lot about people on the surface, but until you have, you spend a little time, you really don't know them that well. And that's what these types of podcasts allow us to do. And I like listening to similar podcasts too. So the ones that I really enjoy are the ones that take time. You mentioned Conan O'Brien, that you liked
Yeah.
Conan a lot. And
Yeah.
so I listen to his podcast quite a bit because he will do the same thing. I mean, obviously there's a lot of jokes thrown in, there's a lot of other things. And usually the people that are on there, maybe they're promoting a new movie or something or whatever, but there's still a lot of what's going on in your life, what got you here. And I enjoy those things. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah. And just to go off of Conan, I mean, going back to comedy, I think in hindsight, Conan was one of those people that I really looked up to as a role model in some ways. I definitely grew up at the age where when I was probably 10, 12, I had a phone, so or an iPad, or I had some type of thing that I could watch YouTube on, and I kind of watched a lot of Conan O'Brien. I'm not even sure what really started it. I think it was his love of history. It was, he went to Harvard. That was kind of a cool thing, at the time for me. It was like
Hmm.
dream big, and some guy who got into comedy, and I love the way he still does, like just the way he connects with people seems very unique compared to maybe some of the other late night hosts I've seen. Other people have that genuine connections, in everyday life, but it seemed very obvious to me that Conan really cared about the guests, and then also just he has incredible comedic timing, and I think just the way he talks about history, the way he talks about his family, was always really interesting to me.
Yeah, totally agree with everything you just said. He's a very bright guy. There's a reason he went to Harvard, and it wasn't because he was
Yeah,
funny.
right, right.
That was just a little side piece there, but smart dude for sure. And that comedic timing and his wit, he is quick.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, hey, is there anything else you want to tell about your story? I mean, I know you're in grad school right now, so what's ultimately your goal?
Yeah, so right now I'm in grad school. I'm studying environment and sustainability management at Georgetown. And it's been a really interesting year. It's a year-long program. So I graduated in 2023 from George Washington, stayed in DC, worked for a year, applied to grad school. And it's been a really great experience. I've really enjoyed going back to school. I think I'll always be a learner. Everyone says that, but I really do. I think I just really enjoy finding things that I'm interested in and then just going down those deep, deep rabbit holes. So I think grad school has kind of allowed me to do that. I just did a project about alternative fuels for cargo shipping. So, but looking at the financing and scalability of that. So I think that's something I never would have done if I hadn't gone to grad school. And the people I've met have been really awesome too. Just a lot of different perspectives on, sustainability, but also just life. I think probably the best conversations aren't about what we're learning in class. It's about learning about, your favorite sport or, your family, things like that. So that's one reason I've really enjoyed grad school, just making those connections. And in terms of what I'm going to do now, I'm a little up in the air, frankly. Once again, I'm studying sustainability management, and with everything going on in politics, not going to get political here, but it's a little bit harder to find a job, especially with what I want to do. I'd like to get into energy policy, so working for utilities or maybe renewable energy policy space. I'm also going to take the time. I graduate in July. I'm going to take the time to just kind of try to figure some things out. Once again, this podcast that I'm doing is definitely very new to me, but it's something I'm very passionate about. And when I get really interested in something, I usually try to do it for a while, long enough where I'm like, this isn't going to go any further. And I'm really happy with what I've already made, that kind of thing. And I think with a podcast in particular, I don't really care if 20 people ever listen to it or if it's 2000 or whatever the number is, because at the end of the day, I'm going to look at these in like 5, 10, 15 years and remember like, oh my gosh, yeah, I remember Kai. That's the guy who took over my job, you know? Even if we don't stay in contact with these people that I have conversations with, I think for me, I'm a very sentimental person. It's going to mean a lot to have those conversations and just be able to remember and even, show my friends, show my family.
And your take is exactly mine. It's just like we do these things because it's an enjoyment. It's whether you consider it a hobby or an interest. But every time I visit with someone, I learn things. I think learning's awesome. I mean, people, I guess at some point, maybe they feel like they've learned everything, but I always joke around and say, if you think about it, your whole life you're learning. And sometimes we learn from mistakes, but you're learning, you're learning, you're learning. And then when you know the most, you die.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and
It's too bad you can't start over with what you know now and keep it going, you know?
right. Right. And I think I'm naturally a curious person, but I think once again, my family definitely instilled that, my mom being a doctor, very like, question the world. And I don't have all the answers, but we'll try to get those answers to you. And when it comes to learning, I think I've realized how learning is so different in different topics, which obvious, but I'll go back to maybe a trauma I had in my life that I actually remember is tearing my ACL senior year of soccer. Tearing the ACL in my left knee was awful. It was painful and everything, but I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about my mom, and I learned so much about the body. Like I know way too much about the knees and joints. I did way too much research into that because I was frankly very anxious about. I ended up having ACL repair surgery. So I think even that type of learning, while it's really different than maybe getting really into history, it's still a version of learning that I really enjoy. And I'll just go back to like the PT process in particular, the physical therapy process and recovering for that ACL surgery was, I think I learned so much about myself in those moments of basically I had issues with my knee and it was locked in place with scar tissue. So I had to go through some painful processes of them trying to break up the scar tissue. And I think those memories of my mom coming in and trying to assure me, help me during those PT sessions are things I'll never forget. And I think it speaks to her character and just, despite being really busy at work, she always, I think for the most part, she like brought me to every single PT session. And when we were at home, very helpful. I mean, for like 6 months, I couldn't move my left leg. It was bent at like I don't know, I think it was like a 60-degree angle or something. So I wasn't able to walk well. I couldn't even put my socks on very well. Even just like I was a senior in high school, looking into college, but every morning my mom would have to help me put on my sock. I think that really just spoke volumes to where I was at that point in my life. And it was a really important reminder that my mom has done so much for me and my brother and my family. So I'm really glad I have that memory, even though, there's a lot of pain in it. I think I learned so much.
Yeah, and a lot of times that's the takeaway is that you have that pain, you have things that you've gone through, but it is a learning experience too, and in our memories. So you have that memory. As you were talking, I thought, oh, maybe you'll be an orthopedic surgeon. Who knows?
Yeah, I wish. No. Yeah, yeah. No, and also even just the appreciation for people and just the different types of jobs people have. I've always been fascinated by the jobs that people have. I think going through that, I talked a lot with the orthopedic surgeon, obviously just how he got to where he was. Knowing a lot of doctors growing up, just from what my mom did, that was a thing. But also just talking to the PT people, getting to learn about how they got to where what they're doing. And at the time, I still wasn't really sure what I wanted to do in life. So getting to talk to all these people about their jobs and what they liked about it, what they didn't like about it. There are other people at physical therapy, and I would kind of chat them up when we were waiting for the physical therapist to come. So really taking those opportunities to learn how people thought they did, like the way that people thought of their jobs really kind of showed me what I might want to do with my life, because some people love their jobs, right? And it was very administrative heavy, and some people hated that aspect, or some people like making decisions, other people didn't. So just having those thoughts at maybe the younger age was also critical to understanding what I might want to do in the future.
Yeah, there's an expression that says, if you love what you do, you'll never work a day in your life. It's what everybody wants, right?
Yeah.
Well, Jacob, hey man, appreciate you reaching out to me. I get people that reach out a number of times a week, as you can imagine, and I look at them and I think it's funny because I can't have everybody on, but I also want people that are going to have a story that might be interesting to those out there listening, right? So, and I don't want all in one age group or all men or all women. So I just try to really mix it up a lot. You know, I like having some younger people on once in a while. We've done a few now with some younger folks. And I think that's good because I like the enthusiasm. You got your whole life ahead of you. And, you know, you're going to be taking care of me here in a few more years because we need the young people to, to take care of all of us old people.
Yeah. And honestly, I've appreciated the depth of their podcast, but also just the diverse backgrounds. I mean, I was listening to, I think Zachary Lou's podcast earlier this week, and I was like, that's so cool. Him talking about the immigrant experience. I'm also Chinese American, but once again, you have two, Chinese Americans with incredibly different experiences,
Yeah, exactly. So again, good luck with your podcast and
thank you.
And with, finishing up grad school in July and with, just your life ahead. You got a lot of years to experience and have a lot of fun. So yeah, I think as we get older, that's one of the things is that people kind of like to realize that they're kind of winding their lives down. And so when they see the young people, like I have grandkids now, and I see that their whole lives ahead of them, and you just at the end of the day, you just want people to be happy. That's with the life experience.
Yeah, no, totally agree.
All right, everyone. Hey, check back in 2 weeks. We'll have another interesting story here on Nobody Knows Your Story.
Not far